Cool. Okay, so we're recording. You're live on channel 4. Don't say fuck bugger.
Good. Cool. Are we kicking off now? You ready?
Do it.
Cool. Hey everyone, good to see you all again. I hope everyone is doing well and is dealing with lockdown now of what is like week, I don't know, where are we? Week 11 or something? I don't know. Whatever. It would be really good to get out of this house now, but it would be great to kind of catch up and actually see people in real life again, actually go for a real beer at a real pub. But in these times, we will still keep doing these virtual happy hours. It's great to kind of get to see people and meet people that we wouldn't do for more than maybe once a year, sometimes not even that. So again, the reason we do these is to just try and keep up communication, try and keep people's morale going during these times, but also just to get some information, get some learning in real quick, sort of snappy TED Talk style presentations. And I think right now we've got probably 3 of the best coming up. So no pressure, team. First of all, we've got Megs up, who's going to give us 10 ways variables can enhance your Forms Pro surveys. Then Rick is going to tell us about responsive Canvas apps with some examples and explanations of how that all pieces together. And then we've got Paddy giving us tips and tools for making our Power Apps iconic. So all of these are real kind of interesting topics, and no pressure, guys, but you've got 15 minutes each to knock it out the park. So rather than listen to me waffle on anymore, I'm going to hand over to Megan to talk through spray variables.
Yeah, well, it would help if I unmuted myself. Can you guys see okay?
Yes, it's good, Meg.
Perfect. All right, so let's begin. All right, so I am going to cover 10 ways variables can enhance your Forms Pro surveys. This is probably the fastest Forms Pro presentation that I have ever done, and maybe will ever do, depending on how it goes. So this is me. I write a ton of stuff about Forms Pro and other stuff as well. So that's all of my connection information. Quick little plug at the bottom there. Just started a podcast a few weeks ago with Lisa Crosby, a fellow MVP. So go ahead and check that out as well if you haven't already. All right, so just a brief sort of rundown in terms of what variables are before we jump into how you can use variables. So a variable is basically a way to basically link the data, link specific data to the respondent. So when you send out an invitation, you send out a survey and you're asking someone to give their responses and give you feedback, it's basically a way to pass through data about that specific person so that when they're looking at the survey, it's a little bit more personalized and they're getting a unique experience. You use variables with Power Automate. There is 1 or 2 exceptions where you don't need to use Power Automate, and we'll cover those, but for the most part, you're going to need to use Power Automate with your variables. The variables are passed from the survey invitation that's created and then returned via the survey response that comes back in. So those variables stick between those 2 different records, and those are actually activity records that are created. The variables are stored in a context data field on the survey response, and then they are extracted from a context data field on, they're passed through and then they're stored, and you can extract them from that survey response. You can have up to 15 variables that you can use. When you're adding the variables, you are on your survey and you basically click on the ellipsis, which is a fancy word for the 3 dots. So you click on that and then you can access the survey variables area. From there are 3 default variables that come with every single survey. There's first name and last name. They cannot be deleted. And then there's also one that is a locale variable that if you've got older surveys, you might not see it on there, but it comes and is added on every new survey that gets created. And then you can add new variables with a name and then a default value if you want to. So think of that as kind of like a fallback value. So if for some reason you're using a field and there might be values missing on some records, then you can set a default value that will be displayed instead. Okay, so the first one So survey description. So after you've added a new survey and you put in the title, you can go ahead and create a description. And in there, you can go ahead and add your variables. So very straightforward, add your new survey, put the title in, and then type whatever you want into the description. And then you can select any of the variables that you've added and linked to that survey. And I apologize, my throat is extremely sore, so apologies for if I'm swallowing a lot. So sorry about that. Then what we can do is we can also add variables into the survey questions itself. So we can see here that we've got first name, and then we've got the actual question title itself. So we can put those variables into the question text so that it's made relevant. So when someone receives that survey, they see, Megan, is all of the information provided about you correct? Rather than just a question that launches straight into it. So it's personalized for me as the recipient. Put variables into question subtitles. So if you have a new question that you've created, you can add a subtitle to it, and then again provide more details and guidance for the question that's being asked. So creating different variables such as case number, case title, different things like that you can then put in so the person actually responding to the case knows, responding to the survey knows and has some context in terms of what they're responding to. Number 4, we can go ahead and we can put variables into email templates. So we can add these into our Forms Pro email templates, and then we use Power Automate to go ahead and actually populate them. The only variable that if you put it into an email template that you don't need Power Automate for is the first name, because whenever you send somebody the request to get feedback, so you're basically sending them a survey invitation, the first name you'll have to put in there. So that's the only variable that you do not need Power Automate for. Number 5, we can embed forms into websites, and then what we can do is pass variables through and retrieve them when the survey response comes in. So if I've got this embedded, I'm asking the first name and the last name and the email, but I want to maybe use this survey in a couple of different pages. So what I can do is I can use a variable for the page name or the page URL, and I can pass that through into, when I embed my survey into my website, I can pass that into the code that I'm embedding. And then when I get the response, I can go ahead and look at the response, and I'll be able to see all of the variables in there. So we'll know exactly which page the person was on when they completed the survey. So number 6, we've got the locale variable. Now remember I mentioned that there were 3 default variables, the first name and the last name, and then the locale variable. This is the only one of the default variables that you can delete. Now you use this in conjunction with multilingual surveys, so that when this survey is sent out, if you're generating an invitation link or you're sending somebody a survey, you can use a field from a contact record, such as preferred language, and then use a compose step in your flow to basically get the value of the language that they've got selected and then translate that into the specific locale. So locale meaning, is it German that's their preferred language? Is it French? Is it English, Spanish, and so on? That way, when you send out the invitation and they click on it, it will open up the survey in the correct language for them. Number 7, so we've got extracting variables. So the variables are stored as a value in the context data field on the survey responses. So what we can do is we can basically get the response and then get the details of it and pull out the variables from that specific survey response. So we can see there that we know that the first name is Jane, and then if we were to scroll along, we could see the last name, and we could see any of the variables that we had populated when we sent out the invitation. They're going to come back through in that response. So then we can use those variables in the response and then trigger and do other things from that specific data. So it's a great way to be able to pass stuff back through that maybe you only really ever need when you get the response, but pass it through when you create the invitation. We can also use variables in branching rules. So a branching rule will allow you to kind of create a bit of a flow within the survey itself. So a variable can be used in conjunction with a branching rule, so that if somebody, if you send out an invitation and then when someone clicks on it and that variable is contained in the invitation, we can use that to say if this specific variable equals X, then hide question 3. If it equals y, then show question 3, that kind of thing. So we can use those variables as part of the branching rules rather than just using questions in branching rules. We can also append to the end of the survey URL. So we can see there's an example of what the URL string looks like, and then at the end you've got the survey ID. Then what we can do is tack onto the end of that and put an ampersand, then CTX equals, and then what we're doing is we're basically setting the variable and then the value that we want to pass through for that specific variable. So in my example, the top one, we can see session ID is the variable, and I want the value to show as Forms Pro level 1. So in this, I can use the exact same survey for an event, and I can send out and ask for feedback using the same survey, but each person that's getting it will see a different type of customization on the survey. So I'll know that this is asking for feedback about Forms Pro level 1. So this is great if you think about events that you've been to and you might get a survey to fill out at the end, and it's got every single survey listed. If you know which events or sessions someone has attended, you could send them the survey just specific for the sessions that they've attended. We can also see there that we can pass through multiple variables. So we've got the format of variable, then the value, then the variable, and then the value. So number 10, we can also use variables to connect surveys together. So we can use a hidden variable to be able to pass through. So again, remember when we create a survey invitation, that's when we're actually populating the variables. So we have our flow and we're able to pass through the variables, the values that we want to pull through either from the contact record or maybe from a case record or whatever it might be. But we can also hard code a variable. And here I've got a variable called survey group, and the value that I'm passing through is superheroes. I might have 3 different surveys that I want to tie together. I can use that same variable name, the same value, and then when I create a report in Power BI, for example, I can then do the sorting and do the filtering of my data based on that specific hidden variable. Now, I actually have a bonus one. So this is tied to the hidden variables. And this is something that Greg Owens, if any of you on the call know Greg, he's also part of our community. And he'd messaged me and said that he started to use hidden variables in his trigger flows in Power Automate as well. So again, we're looking at variables to be used specifically to display data on the survey itself. But what we can also do is use these hidden variables that then allow us to use that specifically for a trigger. So if a value is in this context data field that I mentioned before, if this specific value is in there, then that's going to be used as the trigger to actually kick off and run the flow in Power Automate. Now, that's a ton of information, and obviously in like 10-15 minutes, there's no way that I would be able to do a demo for all of those things. Every single one of those items or those tips or those ways to use the variables that I've mentioned, you'll be able to find on my website, and there's a blog post for every single one of those ways in which you can use variables. So, like I said, that's probably the fastest one, and I think I've actually gone under time, so I could have maybe had a couple of breathers in there. But that is the 10 ways that you can do that. You can also go to this link, so link.meganvwalker.com/10-ways, and that will take you to a list of all of those different ways to use the variables as well. So, did we have any questions?
You've absolutely smashed getting through that in like something, Megs. You could have taken a breath; it would have been fine.
Okay, yeah.
No, that was awesome. That was really good. It appears like we have a slight issue with the chat, which would have been where anyone put any questions. So if anyone's got any questions, can you hit the hands up button, the raise your hand button on Teams, and we'll pass it over. But just in the meantime, if anyone comes up, until anyone comes up with anything, have you ever had any issues with those variables where they're kind of put in the string of the URL or in like essentially a JSON object? If you put any sort of funny characters in there, does that mess anything up?
I haven't, but here's the thing, and people ask me this like a lot. Well, have you had issues with this? I write the content about Forms Pro. I do not use Forms Pro daily. So to me, where you're going to end up seeing any potential issues tends to be more with like volume, I guess, because I'm doing it and it's working in my perfect scenario, isn't it, when I'm creating it for a demo. So I haven't seen any issues, but I guess what I mean is that's not to say that there aren't potentially, but then I'm not using it in a real world scenario.
Fine. Okay, cool. Have we got any other questions? Anyone feel free to jump in. If not, we will move on to Rick.
Awesome.
Cool. No, I think you're good, mate. I think you've covered absolutely everything.
Oh, I'm sure I have. There's no question.
TED Talk. You smashed it. Cool.
All right. Thanks, Lee.
Cheers, Megs. Thank you. Rick, could you want to take us through responsive Canvas apps, examples and explanations? This is going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to this.
Nice. Screen 1. So, do you see my slide? My very impressive slide at the moment?
we can actually see your sort of presenter mode.
Okay.
Display settings at the top. We'll swap over.
Yeah, you're right. I have to do it the other. Sorry for that. 1, 2. Sharing screen. Okay, this should be the one.
That's it. Spot on.
So recently I talked to somebody and I said, well, I'm going to talk about responsive Canvas apps, and he said, okay, yeah, that's everything changes, becomes smaller and larger, and basically that's not responsiveness in my opinion. So in my opinion, responsiveness is something you determine. So yes, it depends on your screen dimensions, the width and the height, but it is you who determines what changes and what does not change. So perhaps that's already one of the main goals I want to present for this demo, because I do have demos, but I also have a few slides. So how do you add responsiveness to your Canvas apps? Well, actually, it's by configuring properties like the X, Y, height, width, visible, etc., relative to your app dimensions. So now let me go to the demo. I like to demo my responsive Canvas apps in Teams because I do think that will be a main platform for a lot of apps to go to. And let me first show you a non-responsive app because that has some interesting features. So this is a phone layout, and now when I change the resolution of the dimension of the screen, you see it changes the height and of the font. So basically, this is what people think is responsive, but actually this app is not responsive. And to be honest, I don't like the font to change all the time. So let me go to the demo too. Here I have this responsive Canvas app. Okay. Here you can see it takes the whole screen. You can also see the sizing of the screen. And here, the main thing to show here is that the font does not change. So when you make your app responsive, and there's a lot of content on the internet, there's content on the internet how to do it. That is app settings. It's not difficult. You have to change it, and then then you can make your apps responsive. But actually, then it does not change your font width. So what to learn from this is that you just cannot say, I have this existing app and I make it responsive. Let me go to demo 4. This is a responsive app only with the fixed header and footer. So again, this is taking the whole width and the height, but when I change the dimensions, you see that the footer and the header, they stay well where you expect, but here in the section in the middle, you can scroll down. So this is something, a lot of people do not know, but you have the special control. It's the canvas control. And that is what I'm using over here. And I hope to show you another example in the studio. So this is an example of a responsive Canvas app where you have the fixed header and the fixed footer. This is another responsive Canvas app example, and here I decided that the it's focused on a mobile view, but here you can, when I click on a date, you see it opens another panel. So it's actually one screen, but it has two panels, and I decided that the panels, they stay fixed in the middle, right? So when I scroll it down, so that's something I decided. There's also this other example I have over here, and here I decided that I do not want to have the panel overlapping each other. No, I want, if I have more screen, I want to have them next to each other. So so this is a mobile view. So on a small screen, you indeed still have the panels crossing each other, but on a large, when you have more width, you can show them together, both the panels. And actually what you're seeing here is you select a date and then you get this form. Actually, there's this countdown. I'm not sure if you see it. So after 5 seconds, it just removes the second panel. But the idea is that I decided that responsiveness means that when you have the width, both panels are shown. So the last example before I will go to the explanation. So this is actually really based on an app I've created for a customer. So this is a menu, and here when as you can see, the menu are cards, and when I change the width, it just changes, right? But it doesn't change everything. So only the position of the cards. So now when I click on a menu option, so we called it a launcher, you get this this gallery, this overview screen, and here you have the what I call a sub. Let me look at the time. Yeah. A sub header, which contains drop downs, which were actually filters. So here you could filter, for instance, on the status 1, and here when I make the screen even wider, you can see the icon changes to a drop down. Let me show you it again. It becomes an icon. What you can also see is in the gallery, the amount of rows and the content which is shown changes. So here now with more width, we have 2 rows to show the content, and when we have less, it becomes 3, and when we even have less width, we don't show the labels at all. So why do you want to do this? Well, basically, when you have the width, why not use it to show even more content than is possible when you have a lesser width? So that's the whole idea. When you make a responsive app, why not? Of course, it's the decision you have to make, but why not take the whole width? And the last thing I want to show you from this app is actually when I click on a record, you will see the detail about this record. So actually, these are 20 fields, and now you will see 3 columns. And when I reduce the size, you will see it will become 2 columns, and even it becomes 1 column. That's perhaps I think it is. So I will show you this in the Power Apps. I think this has to do with the teams. Sorry for that. But here you can see at least there are 2 columns, and when you size it up, it becomes 3 columns. I have to show you this in this one. I still have some time. Okay. Let's see. So here you can see now I can scroll down the whole 20 fields. It's actually 1 column, And now when I have more width, at a certain point there are 2, and at this point, and at a certain point there are 3. So what I'm using here is not a edit form. So now I'm switching back to the presentation. What I'm using here is really all kinds of controls which are connected to each other and with calculations. And I'm going to show you this one, and if I have some time, I will explain you more. So in the demo I just showed you, it was the launcher. So let me recall that it was this one, that you could see that the menu options, they changed the layout based on, or their position, sorry, based on the amount of width you had. So to this, and now it's 2 by 3. So this is all calculations. And what I'm using when I create a responsive canvas app, I'm using something I call an area control. So it's a shape, and I relate all the other controls in that area to that one, directly or indirectly. And that is what's happening here. And here you can see the X property of the area control. And that could be a formula which scares people. I just said it yesterday. I don't hope I will scare people, but let me try to make it a little bit easier for you. Because you have to do some calculations with round down, value, mod, because it has to dynamically change. Well, when it comes to the time, I think I have to skip it down a little bit. But I will share this presentation, and then you can look back at the formulas I've used for this menu. And yes, this does help that you have a little bit idea of mathematics. I also have the I property. Whoa, 15 minutes is quite fast, right? So there is a little bit of homework, but you can ask me if you want to say, hey, Rick, how have you done this? So there's actually this in this overview screen. Here, when I have a lot of width, you see they are all drop downs. And now when I click on one, I can filter on it. But when I do not have a lot of width, you will see it are icons. So I do not directly have the drop down. So I first must click on the icon, and then the drop down appears. And actually, so I now have for a drop down 2 events to be present. One is to click on an icon, like this one, and the other one is if you have a lot of width. And then it should also show a drop down. And to already give you a little bit of hint, it are not the same drop downs. So this is basically, it looks easy, but this one was a little bit complex to realize. I have some takeaways also when you are getting started, or you want to get involved in a responsive canvas apps. So decide what responsiveness means for you. So don't change all the font sizes, etc. Just use fixed area controls. And that's what I mean with the second takeaway. Keep it simple. Just define your areas and define the properties of your other controls related to that area. A Canvas app has its breakpoints, but until now I still define my own breakpoints, because I really said, okay, this has a width of 560 points, and then I want 40 on the left. So I define my own breakpoints. Don't go with what is happening, just make your own. I skipped the fourth one. Please come to me if you don't understand it, but it has to do with, let me give you a little bit of information. When you enable responsiveness by default, you will see that your, for instance, the height of your app will have a minimum value. And that is something perhaps you do not want, but in some situations you do want, but it will create an extra scroll bar. So in relation with the canvas control, you can create double scroll bars. So you can, you have to explain then if your customer that is happening, but it will have its usefulness. The designer is not responsive. So when you make a responsive Canvas app, I normally start with the phone layout and then try to imagine how it should look when I have more width and then make the formulas. And that is something I think people will find a little bit difficult. So you have to save and publish an app and then look at the app if it's working like you should expect. But the designer is not responsive. Also, when you have to do the calculation of your project, pre-state also a little bit extra time, because it does take extra time. Not always, depends on your app. The last example I showed you, it did take a lot of extra effort, but the example with the dates, it wasn't really that much effort. I think only 2 or 3 hours extra. And please also look at the canvas control when you're making responsive apps, because then you can make it scroll. I think it's time's up. So if you have any questions, just contact me on Twitter. Coming Saturday and also soon again, there are 2 events where I will be speaking 45 minutes about responsive Canvas apps, also in relation to Teams. And then I will explain the formulas even more, then I will have some more time. But if you already want to know now, I think the fastest way is to contact me on Twitter. And I want to shamelessly promote this URL, which contains exercises for the Power Platform and is growing and growing. So thank you for your time, and hopefully it was a little bit interesting. I really love responsiveness, but yeah, just try something and hopefully you will too.
That's awesome. Thanks, Rick. Has anyone got any questions? They either want to put their hand up or just chime in. In the meantime, I'm just going to ask one of mine. Have you seen, does it make any difference on the client? I know responsive should be responsive anywhere, but if you're got an app in the Teams app versus the Teams web client, or just flat canvas on a phone or anything else, different phone sizes, does it handle that well, or is there?
Until now, what I have seen is that in the web browser, it sometimes shows in certain situations a vertical scroll bar, which you don't see in the mobile app, for instance, or within Teams client. So sometimes in the web browser I see some extra scroll bar. Okay. But qua functionality, it's really totally the same. It's I don't really see any difference in that. No.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's probably it for me. And the only other thing, really quick, sort of, some of those formulas look relatively complex for a low-code, no-code platform. Do you see anything coming in the product that makes responsive easier? In a quick answer.
No, I don't see. I haven't. To be honest, I haven't seen it. I know they are working on it, but I haven't seen anything. So yeah. But I cannot. So I know things are coming, but I don't know what. Awesome.
Okay. Great, thanks, Rick. That was awesome. It was really great to see. That's more than I've seen anyone make a Canvas app responsive before. So that's wicked to see that some of that stuff is actually possible. Cool. Thank you very much. Okay. Paddy, you've got some great acts to follow now. So good luck with that. So you're going to take us through tips and tools for making your Power Apps iconic. I think we're all a little bit intrigued as to what this means. So we are somewhat excited to see. So over to you, Paddy.
I'll do my best. So you can see my slide.
Yeah, I can see the slides there.
Yeah. So this evening I'm going to talk about, have a bit of fun and talk about icons. I'm going to explain a bit about the importance of icons and how important they are within Power Apps. And then I'm going to show you how to create your own icons and use them in both model-driven apps and Canvas apps. And we'll have a look at some of the tools that I use along the way to create and use those icons. Hold on a second. First, a bit of intro from me. I'm Paddy Byrne, a Power Platform functional consultant working from Bells Hill, which is just outside Glasgow. I'm one of the admins on the Virtual Power Group, and as part of that role, I provide free Power Apps night classes. And those are kind of entry-level night classes for people just coming at the Power Platform, but I try and kind of tailor them so that there's discussion points off the back of them, and that if an expert or someone more experienced in the field comes along, they will also learn something too. And I'll try and do that with this session as well. I'm also a skydiver. I've done 96 licensed jumps. So that's my bow selector profile picture there with my big nose. I'm currently training on information skydiving. What the buzz I get out of that is it's great for I just love throwing myself into something a bit unknown, a bit uncomfortable, coming together as a team and building something beautiful. A bit like hackathons. I'm sure you'll agree, or your first hackathon. I'm also a massive wrestling fan. All in WWE all the way. I've no fancy stats about wrestling. I just watch loads and loads of wrestling. And before anybody says it's not fake, it's predetermined, because that's the thing people say. You know it's fake, don't you? It's not fake, it's predetermined. Talking about icons, we're going to talk about the icon Sting. If you're not a wrestling fan, I'll forgive you for not knowing who Sting is. But the first thing you'll notice about Sting is his colourful makeup. I mean, just look how good that guy's makeup is. It's bright, it's crisp, and above all, it's deliberate. Sting's put a lot of effort into making himself look good. And that's what you should do with the icons in your apps. So many apps I see, especially model-driven apps, where you just use the default icon, and it doesn't tell the story the same way as you would if you put some effort and make some deliberation into what those icons look like. And why are icons important? Icons are important because it's the first thing your users will notice about your app. They're used for important functions such as navigation and performing actions, because research shows that they get processed in the brain 60,000 times faster than labels and text. So easily recognized icons throughout the app helps guide your users through a story that the app's trying to tell them. I'm going to talk about another icon before I go into demo, and that's the rock. I told you it was something different. The rock's another icon I'm sure everybody knows. I know it's very familiar to everybody. The Rock doesn't have fancy makeup like Sting or colourful clothing. In fact, he wrestles in black shorts and black jeans, black boots. But what's the Rock got that's different? He's cool, but more importantly, he's consistent. He's consistent in everything he does. If you see the Rock walk on screen, or you see the Rock's name on a movie poster, you'll know what kind of performance to expect. And that consistency is important in your apps, because consistency is key. Consistency builds familiarity. And familiarity is important to your app audience because it reduces learning and it eliminates confusion. And so one of the best ways to improve familiarity is to use cool, clear, and consistent icons throughout your apps. So I'll show you how to do that by clicking to, first of all, a model-driven app. And a model-driven app, in my opinion, is like the Rock of Power Apps. It's cool. I mean, just look at the user interface. It's cool straight away. It does all the hard work for you, and it's consistent by its very nature. But we can become complacent and let it do everything for us, and become complacent by leaving these icons as default. And this is a great icon because it signifies a missing piece in the puzzle. As good as it is to see an icon, those jigsaw piece icons right down your navigation tells me that that app or that custom entity has been a wee bit neglected. They haven't put the effort that Sting has put into doing his makeup. We need to put a bit more effort in there and make those entities mean something. And we can do that quite easily. We don't need a creative department or a design, graphic design, degree in graphic design to do that. The first tool I would use to give those entities meaning is a tool called Metro Studio. It's free. You just sign up with your email address. Say free, put your email address in, you get a download of an app. But you get this, it's 80,000 plus or 8,000 plus icons, loads of icons in there, icon for everything that you need. And it's fully searchable, and you can search by category as well. So what we'll do, we will put an icon on this cards entity here and make that cards entity mean something more, tell users a bit of a story about it. So we search for card in Metro Studio. We'll get a list of icons. We can filter by wireframe or flat. I'm going to remove flat. It's up to you whether you want to use flat icons or colored icons. I like to use, when I'm doing model-driven apps, a flat wire, a wireframe colorless icon, just to keep that consistency. But as I say, it's completely up to you. And the resize, the size for model-driven app icons is 32, and you can bring the padding right down to like 1 pixel. And you can do quite a lot of stuff in there, rotate it, change the color, like I said. But more importantly, you can export to the best format for model-driven apps and all Power Apps, the SVG format. So let's just save that to our desktop. And we'll use another tool in order to get that into a model-driven app. We'll use a tool within the XRM toolbox. If I can find it. Anyway. There you go, a tool called the Iconator. And this allows us to quickly create the web resources used for the apps within the model-driven app and associate entities. And we can do that if this is already loaded, but you can load from a solution. And this lists the entities that you've got within that solution and images that you've got within that solution. And to add our new card image, click Add Image, browse to the image. And we're not going to add it to the default solution because that's a no-no. We're going to add it to our StudyMate app solution, our custom solution. And that means we get the prefix and everything as well. And that'll create a web resource for that icon. And that web resource can be mapped to the entity just by clicking the two of them and click Map, and then Apply and Publish. If we go back to our model-driven app and refresh the app, that's us within a few, oops, maybe not. Let's try that again. Within a few minutes, we've added a custom icon that means something and tells the user what that entity is all about. But not just talking about model apps, we can use that tool as well to look at Canvas apps. And the Canvas apps allows us to explore our kind of creative side. And that's the first time as a traditional Dynamics 365 model-driven app maker that you get to do that. So we get to be like Sting here and add a bit of flair to our apps. And model-driven apps comes with a catalogue of icons, but they all seem a bit flat to me. And if you look at the icons in this app, we've got multicolored icons, we've got outlines, and we've got a bit of shadow in there as well. And to me, they just look a bit better. It's a bit of a novelty for me that I can go and make these icons. So what I'm going to do in this, I'm going to replace this button here with an audio button to play the audio of my text that's in the card. And to do that, again, I go to Sync Fusion Metro Studio and I'll download, just do another search for another icon. And we'll look for a flat icon this time. And the one that works well is this speaker icon, exactly the same way, except we'll make it nice and big because we're going to edit it before we stick it onto our Canvas app. Again, export it as SVG. And then we can open Power Apps. Not Power Apps. Sorry, I've got a 4-year-old grabbing my so we're going to use PowerPoint to customize and stylize that icon. And we can do that just by dragging it in there.
And if you look at the good old-fashioned, the adoption curvy,
Hi, Keith.
Morning.
Hello.
Oh.
So we've got our SVG file in our PowerPoint, and we can just edit that within PowerPoint. We can add some styles to it. And this is a bit of trial and error, to be honest. So you can have unless you're good with PowerPoint. I'm not great with PowerPoint, but you can add colors and you can add gradients. A good one I use is glows for already pressed icons, but to stick in line with our app design and be consistent, like the rock, we'll just change the colors to some pre-picked, so to some colors that are in our palette. And another tool that's worth mentioning here as well is this color picker that I use. It's a standard color picker. But what I think of this costs about $7. What I like about this is that you can set profiles up, so you don't need to keep looking for the dropper icons and look for different things. You can just set your own personal brand or your own your company's brand or your customer's brand up in that, and those colors are just available to use, and you can copy the hex, etc., and put them into PowerPoint. And we'll add some shadow, and I usually bump that up to about 104 for this app anyway. And once that's done like that, we can right click it and click save as picture. Let's just give it a unique name and put it somewhere that we can find it. And again, we're saving as SVG because that's the best one to save it as and the best type of image to use within Power Apps. And so once that's saved, again, we can use that as any other image within our Power App. We'll upload it. And then we'll just change the image on that control. Here 365. And again, as you can see, we've got a consistent looking icon that matches the rest of our icons, and it's got a wee bit of fancy flair to it as well. It's got a wee shadow in there, and it's using multiple colors, so it's not just a flat icon. And so to close, I will jump to PowerPoint again. And just give you something to take it home. And back to another wrestling analogy. In wrestling, we've got a term called a jobber. And a jobber is someone, a generic wrestler, who comes in to get the superstar over, the biggest star in the show over with a crowd. They tend to get squashed, and no one remembers them when they go home. So my go home is don't be a jobber or a square. Build apps with flair and be the superstar. Is that any questions or comments? I've got a few minutes left.
Awesome. Thanks, Paddy. Do we have any questions on this? No. I guess the only thing that I'd kind of like to raise on here is actually two of the talks we've had tonight. Both Rick and Paddy's are just trying to elevate the things that we build now. It's not just using some of the not the outbox icons, but not just some flat icons, not just using canvas apps kind of as they're sat there, but just putting the polish on the things that we build. I know a lot of people that are at partners or end users, like people pay a lot of money for the things that we build. It's great to just put in that last 10% to really put the polish on it and give the sort of quality that it deserves. And that's something that is missing from such a lot of stuff that's built in our industry, that it makes such a difference. So thank you for that. That was wicked. Really good to see. Alison?
I think Chris has got his hand up.
Yeah, I was deliberately ignoring him, to be honest. But
no, that was awesome. Thanks, Paddy. Actually, I'll tell you guys something. So I'm and Watling gives me crap all the time. I'm horrendously bad at designing pretty apps. So yeah, that was super helpful, man. Thank you. The other tool that I use, which I still don't use well, but it's useful, is Canva.
All right.
Yeah.
I use Canva.
Yeah, it's a good way to make like animated backgrounds and shit. Like, you know, but that was great, man. Thank you. I just thought that was a really good analogy about the rock, and yeah, man, well done. Well done to everyone. Actually, that was really useful.
My wrestling knowledge goes back to the early days of WCW and Flying Brian Pillman and people like that.
No Sting then?
Yeah, well, vaguely. I think that was probably the last time I watched it as well. I know The Rock. I can definitely smell what The Rock is cooking. I can tell you that much.
What is it?
Something like that, yeah. So thanks for that, Paddy. And thank you, Lee, for doing the segues in between. That was some great content there. And I'm really sorry that the chat wasn't working. But if anybody has got any questions that they want to ask, raise your hand, and we'll do our best to deal with it. So just to give you a heads up on virtual goings on, like guys, I know that there is a lot of virtual stuff going on at the moment, and it's very easy to get bombarded with a lot of stuff. But you know, if you have got time, go to the Virtual Events Hub, go and have a look, see what's going on there. And sorry, Carlos, can you go back? Thank you. Also, the virtual lunch is really handy. I found that quite handy sometimes when you're in the middle of a day, just taking a bit of time out. Unfortunately, the guys on the virtual lunch had to listen to me eating noodles today, which was pretty unpleasant. So, but you could have taken part in that too, and so you've missed out as a result, as of not being on the virtual lunch. On a Thursday night, it's the Bespoke Badger. Hooray. Which some evenings has gone on until about 6 in the morning, I believe. Larry wanted to do the walk of shame from one, so he walked around the block at 6 in the morning and came home as his wife was getting up. So that's the kind of behaviour you can expect from that. And last night, if you missed it, was the virtual power group who had Matt Collins-Jones on giving a whistle-stop tour of some stuff on Power Automate, which is the virtual power group's fantastic. I love the format that they have there. I haven't seen any of Paddy's evening classes, but I am going to go and check them out. So Paddy, perhaps you can WhatsApp me a link for that. I'd like to promote that for you on my Power Platform series that I'm doing online at the moment. Next slide, please, Carlos. Thank you, lovely assistant. And coming up on the 18th and 20th of June, we have Power Platform Fest, the Summer 2020 Blast, which is probably quite an unfortunate name, I think. Or is it just me? I'm not sure.
It's American.
Okay, right. So now it makes sense. Yeah. Actually, yes, I've seen quite a lot of. It's Lee's birthday tomorrow, is it? Tomorrow?
Yeah.
The start of Power Platform. So basically, I think John Levesque had quite a lot to do with this Power Platform Fest, and he's deliberately organised it to coincide with Lee's birthday. So,
yeah, I think it's just in celebration, to be honest.
Yeah, basically, it's a whole day of content about Lee and a bit of Power Platform stuff thrown in as well. Actually, I have seen the content for that. I was having a look at it earlier. It looks amazing, to be fair. There's quite a lot of stuff going on there, so do check it out. Have we not got a link for that, Carl?
I've got notes I'll give you in the chat, which you can't see, which is not helpful.
No, but we can read it out. I'm sure I can read it out. 20th of June, Saturday 20th of June, we've got DevOps Portal on 365portal.org, which will be epic. And then 22nd of June is Virtual Power Group. Virtual Power Groups, Power Apps Night. So that's you, Paddy, is it? That's your night?
Yeah, that's
right.
the night class. We're going to be looking
cool.
at solutions.
Cool. So everyone bundle along to that. That looks awesome.
I promise no wrestling.
I don't mind wrestling. I think it's good. I think perhaps, like, what are you going to do when we're not doing virtual events anymore? As in, am I allowed to run in from the side with a fold-up chair and or anything like that?
Of course, yeah. An invasion.
Yeah, it's like those are the only bits I used to enjoy, or when people do that thing where they jump from the corner, like off the ropes. I don't know what that move is, but it's my favorite. So then we've got on the 27th of June, AI Saturday, which is also on the 365 portal. Then 27th of June to 3rd of July is Summit Europe, which obviously is all virtual now, including a hackathon, which I think Chris and Keith and myself are. That's not the same hack, is it, that we're doing? No, it's a different hack.
On the same day.
Yeah, just because why wouldn't you? Obviously,
that's how we roll.
Yeah, yeah. And 4th of July, Azure Platform Saturday, and then it's not on the slide, but 6th of July is my birthday. I'll put up my. Oh, well done, Carlos. I'm glad you put it in there. Nice. So I do accept donations, not to charity, just to me for my birthday. And I will spend it wisely. And then on the 8th of July, we've got D365 UG Birmingham. I can't remember who's talking. I think I did see it. Does anybody on the call know who's doing sessions? You're doing a session.
Yeah,
Who else?
with
Cheryl,
and Cheryl.
yeah.
Cheryl. Cheryl's on the call as well, isn't she? Hi, Cheryl.
Hello. Yes.
Hello.
It's my birthday on the 30th of June, so we can celebrate together in the middle. Yeah.
Honestly, you're going to have to punch Carl because he hasn't put your birthday on the slide. So just throwing that out.
Sorry.
Call yourself a friend, Carl. But
She wasn't passive aggressive about her birthday not being on the slide earlier.
see, that's the way to get things done. It's the passive aggressive approach. And 16th of July, Power Apps / Automate London, which obviously Keith is going to be on, presumably. And we've got 22nd of July is our next Power Platform virtual happy hour, and we have a big celebrity special guest for that one, who shall remain a secret. So watch out for the tweets and the LinkedIn updates. We'll announce it a bit nearer the time. Then 27th of July is the D365 UG UK, which I believe is also virtual. Well, all of these are virtual, aren't they? So pretty much. So that's pretty much everything, I think, Carl, unless anybody else on the call would like to promote anything they're doing at all, or has got anything they want to ask a question about, please do unmute yourself and chime in. The silence was deafening. Otherwise, it will just leave us to say a massive thank you to Megan, who wasn't feeling very well today, bless her. So thanks very much, Megan, for soldiering on. And also to Rick and Paddy for their awesome content too. Thanks to Lee for doing a wonderful job of presenting. Thanks to Carl for keeping the wheels turning on this. And thanks for Chris for being there and being the person that makes these things happen. And I think we're just going into like a general, is it a general free-for-all now, a bundle? So like networking bundle.
Yeah.
If everybody, you don't have to turn your camera on if you don't want to, but if you do, great. If you're here, I'm just looking down and seeing if there's any people that we don't know that aren't leaving right now. If you're here and you perhaps don't know some of us and you want to put your camera on, or you don't have to put your camera on if you want to introduce yourself. I can see there's a few names of people on here that I don't particularly recognise. There's Laura GB. Hi, Laura. It's lovely to see you. Oh, Nigel, how you doing? Oh, Nigel flicked up and then he went again. So yeah, how's everybody doing? Anybody want to introduce themselves? Feel free, go ahead. Otherwise, how's everyone coping with the lockdown? And do we think there's going to be a second spike?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes.
As we're doing birthdays, shout out to my fellow LB Lee Baker. It's his birthday tomorrow.
Yeah, were you not listening when we?
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, Luce.
Yeah,
Oh,
thanks,
shit.
Luce.
Thanks, guys.
Shall I put the slide back up, Luce?
we can go back through that again.
You
It's
see
all right.
this? It's over here.
Oh my god, it's in blue and white, and I missed it. How
Yeah.
did I not see that?
We
Okay, all right.
we even made a joke about John Levette coordinating all of his content in celebration of Lee's birthday.
Yeah.
That's fine. We know you're at home with the puppy. Not a
Honestly,
euphemism.
Massaging Lee's feet.
The recording just to catch up if you want.
All right, yeah, thanks.
And oh yeah, there will be a recording of this. I should have said that, shouldn't I? In fact, I should probably stop recording now, shouldn't I? There will be a recording of this available, which will be emailed out to you if you're on the mailing list. If you're not on the mailing list, please sign up to the mailing list. I'm going to stop recording.
We'll put it on YouTube and publicise it.